possible character, and he's one of the people, one of the main reasons that we need these protections. So, and it's not like if we get rid of him, there's not going to be some other asshole that's going to take his place. There's no way to ensure that, and he does have the free right to go and spend his money how he wishes and invest his money. So there's no way for us to just attach this to specific landlords and hope that the problem will go away, which is what it seems like Steve Corker and the Landlords Association wants us to do. And it's fucking stupid. It's just dumb. It's just them trying to say we want this to go away. There's no real compromise. We need these protections set in stone, and it needs to be law. Rent control regulation. Washington currently prohibits rent control regulation and prohibits local jurisdictions from enacting rent control regulation to address soaring rent increases. A bill is working its way through state legislature that will repeal that law and allow cities to address local concerns with local laws. So right now there's a state law that is preventing any rent control. Seattle got around it in a way to where they don't have rent control, but what they do have is a protection that requires landlords to give 60 days notice if they are going to raise the rent more than 10%. So it at the very least, gives tenants some room to move if that's going to happen. But really what we need to be able to do is enact rent control and say, hey, no, you can't just profit off of low vacancy rate. You can't just kick people out and move people around. And people need a sense of community and a sense of belonging and a sense of safety and protection, and they need to feel like they're at home. So this real quick, I'll read what the landlord suggestions were. Some of these are landlord suggestions. Some of them come from other people in the community, I believe. I'm a little confused on where this list came from, but Steve Corker from the Landlords Association was the one handing them out during the landlord meeting. So so it says here, problems identified to date and potential solutions proposed by community members to date that can be accomplished by city ordinance or program. Ideally, additional proposed solutions will be added during the public process. 1. Damage to premises from tenants without assets to pay for repairs. A. Facilitate landlord access to fund to reimbursement for tenant damages. Now, okay, so landlords with Section 8 already have the ability to collect $5,000 that comes from state funds, and they just passed it yesterday that there is another additional, I believe, $5,000 that would be made available to landlords from the city. So it's up to $10,000, and I believe it is just for Section 8 housing. So, but landlords at the landlord meeting were definitely requesting that it be open to free. I don't know how they put it. There's a terminology, and I know it, but I forget things really easily. But the terminology basically is just saying that market rate places. So no Section 8, no vouchers, no, just regular housing without any government assistance or anything. And they're trying to cover their business that way. And part of the problem we have with landlords getting more protections is that it further perpetuates a stereotype that is essentially baseless. There's no evidence that Section 8 tenants are more likely to damage property than non-Section 8 tenants. So when we put those protections in to calm the landlord's feelings, then we are kind of perpetuating that idea, like, oh yes, they are going to damage your property, but here we'll fix it when they're done damaging your property. So the next one is fear of unreliable tenants. Create centralized service with the city to provide reliable credit, criminal background, and reference checks that are good for 90 days. Now we like this one. And the reason that we like this one is we want, if you've ever had a credit problem and you're trying to find a place to rent and you don't get into a place, that's $50 on that background check that you just paid for no reason. So then you have to move to another place and you pay them $50. And you can keep doing this for a while, and $50, $100, that's a lot of money when you're struggling paycheck to paycheck, and you're trying to make sure that you have money for a deposit, and you're trying to make sure you have money for first month's rent, and possibly you're trying to make sure you have money for last month's rent. So 3, flexibility in changing uses of premises. Enumerate all the permissible reason for landlords to change the property use during a tenancy. 4, lack of rental stock within the city. Finalize planning and zoning regulations that support increased infill development. Increase the number of multifamily tax exemption units in the city. So that's a good thing. Apparently, a lot of the single family zoning was done back during the, I would assume, like the 50s and 60s. And it was meant to prevent black people from moving into white neighborhoods, basically. This happened all over America. I'm not sure that's the specific reason that it happened every single place, but I think class had a lot to do with it too. There was a lot of people that didn't want poor people moving into their neighborhoods, so they didn't want apartment buildings to be built in around their neighborhoods. And so, I mean, this had a lot to do with people moving to the suburbs because they were like, oh, the black people are coming, so we got to get away. We got to run away to the suburbs. And so anyways, it's basically a racist or classist law, however you look at it. It's discriminatory. And so they're trying to open up single family neighborhoods to allow apartment buildings and allow conversions and that sort of thing, which is good. One-way lease provisions make all lease and rental agreement provisions mutual within the city. Yeah, so one-way leases are what George Janowski has all of his tenants on, South Hill Investments. And basically what it does is it protects the landlord, but it doesn't protect the tenant. You go into an agreement that you are going to be there for 12 months on a month-to-month basis. So what that means is he can raise his rent, he can kick you out, he can do whatever he wants, and you can't. If you decide you're going to move before that 12 months is up, you have to pay him money. If he wants you out, you're out within 20 days. And he will wait until 20 days. He'll give you 20 days exactly. He knows. I mean, it's the most cutthroat, ruthless business I've ever personally had to deal with. So I'm reading this here. Ambiguous rules on how to assess source of income under city ordinance, unexpected large rent increases. And this is a good one. This is basically the same thing they have in Seattle. Provide increased notices to tenants of rental increases that would total more than 10% of the periodic rental amount owed for any full month in the preceding 12 months. 8, retaliation against advocacy by tenants or landlords. Protect tenants and landlords from any adverse action substantially motivated by retaliation for any action in advocating or organizing for legal rights under city, state, or federal law. 9, unexpected notice that tenancy is ending. Longer notices for ending tenancy when reason is unrelated to non-payment of rent or non-compliance with rental agreement. So yeah, you need better than that. You shouldn't be able to kick somebody out just, and giving them notice doesn't make it any better. I mean, it's okay. It does make it better, but by a very, very tiny margin. So this song is for the landlords. It's called Pity the Downtrodden Landlord by Fred Hellerman.
To a man who is misunderstood, He gets all the kicks and the curses, though he wishes you nothing but good. Well, he wistfully begs you to show him you think he's a friend, not a louse. So remember the debt that you owe him, the landlord who lends you his house. So pity the downtrodden landlord and his back that is burdened and bent. Respect his gray hairs, don't ask for repairs, and don't be behind with the rent. Now you're able to work for a living and rejoice in your strength and your skill. So try to be kind and forgiving to a man whom a day's work would kill. You can work and still talk to your neighbor. You can look the whole world in the face. But the landlord who ventured to labor would never survive the disgrace. So pity the downtrodden landlord and his back that is burdened and bent. Respect his gray hairs, don't ask for repairs, and don't be behind with the rent. Now, when a landlord resorts to eviction, don't think that he does it for spite. He is acting from deepest conviction, and what's right, after all, is what's right. But I see that your hearts are all hardened, and I fear I'm appealing in vain. Yet I hope my last plea will be pardoned if I beg on my knees once again. To pity the downtrodden landlord and his back that is burdened and bent. Respect his gray hairs, don't ask for repairs, and don't be behind with the rent.
Okay, so I want to start the tenant testimony off with a letter that was written and read by somebody else because somebody could not be present there. It's detailed in the letter, so I don't need to explain any of it. I want to jump right into it. Dear City Council, I stood before you over a year ago, asking for your help. My Finch Hall neighbors and me were losing our apartment to condo conversion, and those of us most devastatingly affected were over 60, mostly female, retired, on fixed incomes, single, disabled. A medical transcriptionist whose job was replaced by the digital age and preferred to spend time with her cat, a secretary who had lived there for 20 years and paid out over $100,000 in rent, a hearing-impaired accountant, a female soldier who had been in combat and was now a priest, a woman who had her food delivered and I never saw because she was disabled, a grandfather and blue-collar worker with bad knees who had trouble walking because he couldn't afford a knee replacement. Most had lived there for over a decade. I was the newest to the bunch, 4 years, a former college professor, a grandmother, forced into early retirement due to disabling illness. Most of those negatively affected by the conversion had lived in West Central all their lives, owned homes, paid taxes, raised kids, had family in the neighborhood. My 81-year-old mother lived around the corner. All were productive, independent, and active. Though a newcomer, I was a volunteer at the Y and the Spark Center. I taught classes at Act 2. I had organized a writing group and participated in a community indie radio show. A delegate and briefly a precinct captain, I worked with the Democratic Party during and after the presidential election. I freelanced with the Business Journal and Inlander. I even interviewed Jim Frank about the night market. He said he cared about the old neighborhood and wanted to merge the new with the old, minimize the impact by making sure the sidewalks ran from Old West Central to the new. I was duly impressed and felt I had chosen the right place to settle. Little did I understand that allowing the sidewalks run from old to new would never take away the invisible wall. That meant people like me, like others at Finch Hall and in West Central, would be dismissed, displaced, thrown away because we no longer fit into the picture of the bold new Spokane. Soon enough, we caught the drift. We were being forced unprepared into our housing market crisis.